1967 meant for Israel two contradictory things. One, military grandeur, but at the same time, moral and political crisis and conflict. It had inevitably an extraordinary impact on practically every sphere of the nation's life: the economy, politics, society, and her international standing. The encounter of the Israelis with the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria at the time was of historic meaning for the entire society. It shifted practically every political party to positions that were different from their attitude before the 1967 war. Imagine, for example, that today the spearhead, the vanguard of settlements is the National Religious Party. In the government of 1967, the one that went to war in 1967, the National Religious Party was the most moderate, the less trigger-happy in the Israeli government in 1967. The encounter with the biblical lands of Judea and Samaria, and I'm using the term Judea and Samaria because this is the term that was used, had an enormous impact, even on a newspaper that today is the spearhead of liberal journalism in Israel, Haaretz, that was also affected by that sort of messianic feeling that overtook Israeli society. There was also a sense that the laborite establishment, labor that governed the country for so many years, had lost its pioneering impetus, which was the impetus that brought about the creation of the state. And this now was to be taken over by a new socio-political elite, which is a national religious element that emerged out of the war with as a robust socio-political phenomenon. So you could see that the settlements were started by these groups, the Bloc of the Faithful, but it was sanctioned politically by labor. And the first political party that created settlements was labor. And in fact, practically the first man that gave his approval to the settlements was a Nobel Peace Laureate, one of the fathers of the Oslo Accords, together with our friend Saeb Erekat and others. So that was the beginning. And it went on and on when labor tried to make the distinction between political settlements, that is those that are in the heartland of the West Bank, in sort of biblically sensitive places, and the security, so to speak, settlements that labor was in favor of. This distinction was blurred in 1977 when Likud came to power. You cannot separate the rise of the Israeli right, in spite of the fact that it only came to power in 1977, you cannot separate it from the war of 1967. It was a sort of retarded effect, but it was linked to it. We have in Israel then and today, in a much more emphatic way, the decline of the old Israel, and it's all related in one way or another to the occupation. We have a decline of the old secular, modernizing Israel that metaphorically you can define as the Tel Aviv Israel, and the Jerusalem Israel that metaphorically represents Jewish history and the rise of ethnicity, of an ethnic nationalism in Israel that is gaining ground and is reflected more forcefully in the government of Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu discovered, and his political power base discovered that putting an emphasis on the Jewish characteristics of Israel is a winning horse in this political competition. He won the elections in 1996 by saying that Netanyahu is good for the Jews, not for the Israelis. He won the elections recently by saying that Arabs are heading in droves to the polls. Again, in defense of the Jewish characteristics of Israel. So the historical Israeli is receding in a way in favor of this ethnic emphasis by the government by the current coalition. And this has a direct link to our encounter with the West Bank. Now, you need to bear in mind as well that those of us that always warned of the persistence, against the persistence of the occupation, that sooner or later the practices of occupation will spill over to this side of the Green Line. And it does, I mean, because that's not outre-mer, this is not a French colony in Southeast Asia. I mean, it is contiguous to Israel, and the Green Line has been blurred. So you have this spillover of practices, of attitudes, of the mentality of occupation. You can see that in the rise of illiberal practices in Israeli politics. That is, Israel in recent years, particularly under the current government, is endorsing all kinds of laws that are not the kind of laws that one would expect in a liberal democracy. And this is obviously related, not in a direct way, but yes, in terms of the ecology or the ecosystem that is established in the territories. And the same can be said about the ethnocentric policies of the current government. Now, I think that obviously there is international criticism of Israeli practices for the persistence of occupation, Israeli international pressure one way or another. But I think that the Palestinians would be wrong to think that these would make any substantial change in the conditions on the ground. In my view, Israel has never had in its history the kind of global outreach that it has today. Normally, one used to think that Israeli foreign policy has only one topic to deal with. And wherever you go internationally, visiting foreign ministries or governments abroad, the first question would be Palestine. Well, this is no longer so. The Palestinian question is no longer the epicenter of neither of the region nor of the dialogue that Israel is conducting internationally. Israel today has a global outreach of impressive dimensions. So thank you, BDS. I mean, if BDS didn't exist, Netanyahu might have liked to invent it because it serves a purpose. He can mobilize in sort of diverted mobilization. You know, diverted mobilization is a term that you use when you mobilize people around a fictitious stuff and you consolidate your political power that way. And this is exactly what he's doing. BDS has a marginal, if any, impact on Israeli conditions. Israel exports today to three powers that were at the forefront of the opposition to the state of Israel on the question of Palestine: Japan, India, and China, more than it exports to the United States thanks to the free trade agreement. And the gas hub in the Eastern Mediterranean and relations with the government of Tsipras. Did you have, Sai Barakat, a friend more warm and forthcoming than Tsipras and these kind of political parties? Well, Tsipras has come to Israel 3 times in the last year and signed agreements with Israel of all kind of, on all kind of issues. So internationally, and here I do second your remark about the international community, that is not a factor really in changing the situation on the ground. Now, the shift of Israelis to the right has also to do with their interpretation of why the peace process failed. We had two governments, the Barak government and the Olmert government, that were sincere in trying to reach a settlement. The interpretation after the failure of the negotiations was that, and we are not going to engage now in an academic discussion whether the interpretation is right or wrong. It becomes a fact of life the moment it is an interpretation that has a political impact. And the interpretation is that the Israelis gave the skies, or what Arafat liked to say when he used to say, we are not asking for the moon, the Israelis gave the moon and they got an intifada. That's the foundation of the political discussion. And labor hasn't been capable of changing this axiomatic premise of Israeli politics. And since we gave away everything, what can we expect from Netanyahu? So do the Palestinians really expect Netanyahu to go beyond Olmert, beyond Barak? It won't happen. So you see, on the one hand, if you conduct a poll in Israel today, let alone in Palestine, but if you conduct a poll in Israel, you will see an overwhelming majority in favor of the two-state solution. But it is a dormant opinion. It is not an active opinion. People do not go to the streets and ask their government to bring us the two-state solution. And people do not vote in elections. Given the ethnicity as a central element in Israeli politics, peace is not a question in elections. The Palestinians are on the dark side of the moon. Why would we now bother to go back to something which is fundamentally non-attractive? Yes, we don't want a one-state solution. We do not want a South African situation that, by the way, might not present a South African solution in the Israeli-Palestinian case. It might be a South African situation without a South African solution. So we don't want it, but why make the effort now when the economy is booming, international relations have never been better, we have a friendly American administration, Israel has become a tacit or non-so-tacit member in the Sunni alliance in the Middle East. So Netanyahu tells us, I don't know, maybe he's wrong, he's right, but this is the premise upon which he works. So why go back to the 1967 borders? What sense does it make? So this is where we stand today. Now, there is a morally corrosive effect. Saeb spoke eloquently about the needs and the dreams of the Palestinians. I think that our dream, those of us who want a more morally solid society and state and policy in Israel, would like to see a two-state solution. But the socio-political backing for it, given all this environment that we live in, is not particularly conducive to a political solution, one that the two parties can live with. This is right now how I would define the situation. Thank you.